Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics with a really fun project today. This is called a Quillow, a combination of pillow and quilt, thus a quillow. These have been around forever. They're so fun to make. This is Stomp Stomp Roar by Stacy Iest Hsu. She's a designer for Moda Fabrics. When we saw the fabrics and we knew that this was in perfect time for maybe you have a child getting ready to go to camp, maybe for the summer, maybe it's sleepovers at grandma's house, a friend's house. I love when we can send quilts with our kids. It's like we're still with them, even though, maybe they're somewhere else. I love sewing for kids. This is a free download. So if you've got some fabrics at home you want to use, by all means do that. But if you think you might want to do the Stomp Stomp Roar, be sure to pick up those kits. Very limited amounts. They'll include charm packs, specifically 4 of your Stomp Stomp Roar charm packs, so you don't have to cut any of the fabrics for the patchwork. We'll be sure to include this lovely teal Moda solid, and then the backing fabric as well will be in that kit, and of course your instructions. So a lot of fun. You'll be able to literally follow exactly along with what I'm doing. But again, if you want to do this with your own fabric at home, you'll need about 4 charm packs, or you could take a layer cake, which is the 10-inch squares, cut them in half vertically and horizontally, and basically create your 4 charm packs, however you want to do that. So when you get your 4 charm packs, and I'll show you how we arrange this in the pattern, you're just going to decide which ones you want to use for the patchwork on your quilt top, and then you'll of course need 9 of those to be left over for your pillow. It's a pretty good size quilt, so I'll just be demonstrating on the pillow how to create the patchwork, and it's the same process for the quilt, just more of it going on, of course. And I can't wait to show you how to fold this thing back up. It took me a couple tries to figure out the best way. I'll try to show you that in the very end. It's just such a fun thing. I see it as a pillow. Maybe you're just going to read a book, because we certainly want to encourage our kids to read. And when they're ready to go to bed at night, they just take the quilt out and they're off to bed. So I love that. Let me grab our pillow. So just kind of ignore the outer borders for now. You'll lay out your patchwork again for the quilt as you would like and leave that aside. And now you have your 9. We will be assembling that patchwork in rows, whether it's 3 here or longer rows for your quilt, and press the directions of the seam allowances all in one direction or the other. And I'm recommending like rows 1, 3, 5, and 7 pressing to the left, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 pressing to the right. What that's going to do for you is when you start to sew the rows together, is it gives you a nice interlocking seam, which is exactly what we want. It helps you to get those points hitting exactly where you'd want them to hit. Once that's done for the quilt top, and that's one step that's a little bit different than our pillow that we're creating, is notice how our quilt top doesn't have borders like our pillow does. So sometimes when you have all of these seams hitting, it's important to kind of lock those in with what's called a stay stitch. We mentioned that in the pattern here, that once your patchwork is complete, and before you start attaching that to the batting and the backing, we recommend that you go around here with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and maybe even a shortened stitch length to just go all the way around the perimeter to lock in those seams before you move into the next step. For the pillow, because we have borders on, we don't need to do that. It doesn't hurt if you do, but if you do, make sure it's only an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, not a 1/4. These will, of course, the patchwork is all sewn with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You'll put your side borders on and your top and bottom borders on, and your pillow top piecing is complete for now. Our patterns will guide you into cutting a larger piece, batting and background, which will now be placed. This is, if you had a print fabric, this would be right side up. We'll be taking our patchwork and placing those right sides together. So you've got wrong side up, and I'm just going to go in and pin with my clover pins. I want to keep it nice and flat. And I'm going to be sewing this now. We're going to increase this to a 1/2 inch seam allowance. which is not something that we're used to doing as quilters. We really got that 1/4 of an inch figured out, or at least we're hoping we got it pretty close to figure it out. But I'm not as comfortable finding that 1/2 inch seam allowance. And the reason we want the 1/2 inch seam allowance is because of the turning through of the quilt into the pillow and back out. There's a lot more tugging and pulling on a Quillow than a normal quilt. And we know these are going to camp. They're going to get washed over and over again. So that extra, that 1/2 inch seam allowance just gives you that much more fabric locked in so your seams aren't coming apart as the years pass by and your kids are using their Quillows over and over. So go ahead and use your flower head pins, whatever pins you want. We're just going to pin this together and sew around the perimeter using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, be sure to leave an opening of about 5 to 6 inches where you're going to turn this through. You might even put some markings in here. So wherever you begin stitching, start there, back stitch. You want to lock that in. Remember, we're turning this through. Stitch a 1/2 inch all the way around, stop here and reverse. If you're really uncomfortable with that 1/2 inch, first off, it doesn't need to be exactly that. Don't worry about that. It's supposed to be a fun project. We just know we definitely want way more than 1/4. But if you're like, no, I really want that to be very precise, use a tool like any straight edge you might have. This is the Creative Grid 2.5 inch. And sometimes when I'm really uncomfortable with a seam allowance, I draw it on. There's no shame in doing that. So we'll head, in fact, I'm just going to start here and start sewing. And I like the idea of marking it, but I'll go ahead and start stitching all the way around. When I come back, we now need to trim away the excess batting and backing. And then we're going to clip in our corners just to relieve a little bit of pressure and turn our pillow through. Once we have that done, of course, we need to trim away that excess batting and backing just to be even with that top you established. So that's what you're lining up with here. This is fun already. I remember going to camp. I had a sleeping bag and I brought snowmobile boots because there was still snow. And by the time I left, I never wore the snowmobile boots. And when I went to take them with me, a mother mouse had gotten in my boots and had made a little nest for her babies. I left those boots at camp so that mother mouse would have a spot for her babies. I'll never forget that. Okay, once that's done, we just trim the corners about at a 45. And we'll turn that through. You know, I could have trimmed that just a little better on this side. Let me do that real quick. There we go. And now we'll turn it through, and I'm definitely going to be grabbing for that point turner you've probably seen me use so many times. And we'll turn it out. The other thing you could do, you know, we've all got those scraps that that we just accumulate over projects and over time. We have something on the website called the Perfect 5, a ruler, which I really love it. It makes it so easy to just lay that on top of our scrap fabric and cut around it. It's perfect for a spinning mat And now you can just do this very scrappy. Maybe you've got a kiddo that loves a certain color. Grab all your scraps in those colors and maybe use your perfect 5 to just cut out a bunch of 5-inch squares. And that's a good way to go about this as well. Okay, so this is where the point turner comes into play and is a great helper because I can only go so far with my fingers, and this is going to help me get all of those points out to exactly where I want them to be. Okay, so now that that's pretty well turned through, I'll definitely recommend a good press. And of course, we need to close that opening. So we're going to remember that normally we're turning that inward by 1/4 if we need that 1/2 inch turn in. And we will top quilt all the way around that to close that opening, and it helps it look really, really finished. We'll give that a good press. And this is where you'll want to go back now to a 1/4 inch seam allowance as we press this out all nice and smooth. Right? And so adjust back to the 1/4 inch all the way around, all the way around. That will certainly close the opening. Now you can also opt to just stitch in the ditch, both vertically and horizontally. That's all we did to kind of just quilt that and have everything kind of lock in, which you'll definitely want to do. And I'll show you ours. So you see that here. So we just stitched in the ditch. Nothing fancy. If you want to do fancy quilting, by all means, go for that. I think that'd be really fun to add a lot to that. So I'm going to open up the quilt now because I want to demonstrate to you how the pocket is added to that. And I'll be referring to both the pattern, but also the quilt so that you can see how that's added. The quilt top, again, just to review that, patchwork, same thing. You've got batting, backing. Remember, it was batting. Your beautiful backing of your dinosaurs will be right side up, and make sure that orientation is right, right? So when your dinosaurs aren't upside down on the back, so just be mindful of that. You'll layer your patchwork right side together, just like we did our pillow top. Sewing all the way around with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, definitely leaving a bigger opening, about 10 inches. You're going to be trimming your batting and your backing, again, like we did with the pillow, turn it through. And again, top stitching around that, not just to finish it, but to close the opening. And again, we just stitched in the ditch, and I'll show you what that looks like. So you can see that, and I'll just move those pre-cuts out of the way. So you can see we didn't even stitch around here. We just stitched in the ditch. You could finish that around the edge if you would like. Looks like we didn't do that. So let's flip this over. I want to show you this part. You will have had your quilt would be in this arrangement where you have the quilt top done, and now you want to add, it looked like this. We'll turn that back through. This takes some space. You definitely need some, definitely room to be able to do all this. Okay, so this is what this will look like. It might even be easier to do it on the ground. So you want to measure inward. Notice we've got 1 row, 2 rows, and about a half. 1 row, 2 row, about a half. So you'll have your pillow. Of course, that would have been already quilted all the way around. And I think my sample's probably a little bit smaller. That's fine. And if you have a directional fabric, which I do, be mindful of that. Just be mindful of that. If you're happy with that location, again, this is a great one to use the flower head pins to just pin around, of course, out of your seam allowance. And now with a shortened stitch length possibly. There's a lot of bulk going on. I'm on about a 2.0 right now, and I don't think I should go shorter. This is a great one for a walking foot. The BERNINA has a dual feed, which acts like a walking foot all the time. It's one of my favorite features, but if you have a sewing machine that does not have dual feed, maybe you're not on a BERNINA or a type of machine that has that feed dogs on top and bottom, this is a good time to get your walking foot because it's going to help pull all of this around and not bunch this up. I've just grabbed some coordinating thread and whatever color you're going to be using. Started here in a corner and about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit more than 1/8 if you want. And we went around twice, and we definitely reinforced here significantly because the next step we're going to do, and I'm going to clear off my table. I need to move the sewing machine and move everything. I want to show you how to fold up a quillo because I think that part can be a little bit mysterious. It definitely threw me for a little bit of a loop. So I want to share with you at least the approach we take to folding these up. So I'll get this cleaned up. I'll be right back and we'll fold up our quillo. So now that we've made our quillo, we're like, how do we fold this burrito up? Okay. So we turn it to the side. This seems to be the best way we figured out how to do this. And we're going to go ahead and flip it over and see all of our fun patchwork. We know our pocket is down at that end, and we made great efforts to make sure that it was centered on the back. So I fold the side in until it reaches that pocket. When I want to go past that, there's this resistance. So it's a very natural thing. You'll feel when it's where it should be. Similarly, on that side, we'll just bring that inward. This is where the pocket is. So we're going to fold, I would say, about in thirds. And fold again. Let's see where our pocket is. And I need to go a little bit further because we want to be right just before that. Perfect. As smooth as we can be. And we'll bring this right over the top, just like that. So you can see that's the arrangement. Think about grabbing socks where you've married them together and kind of turn them right side out. So when I grab in to those corners, I'm trying to grab and bring everything through as best I can and shove it right back into those corners. A little bit of an arm wrestle thing. If you give it a shake, that will really help you. And now you're just smoothing things into the corners. And with just a little bit of effort, you have a quillo. So isn't that awesome? Again, I just think these aren't just for kids, but I don't know. To me, they're geared for that because when my kids would go away to camp or grandma's house or a friend's house, I missed him and I wanted part of me to still be with them, and it's a way to do that. And I think the kids really enjoyed having something special that they know was uniquely made just for them. So hey, be sure to pick up the kit if this is the perfect fabric for you. If not, grab that download. We have lots of lovely charm packs, layer cakes that you could cut in half, both vertically and horizontally, or just grab your scraps and get sewing. So thanks again. Subscribe if you haven't already done that, and you'll be seeing me soon on another Shabby video.